This is Robert Capuccio. Welcome to the Self-Help Antidote, a weekly dose of reason, perspective, and insight, where we challenge conventional thinking and explore authentic strategies and insights around personal transformation. Our commitment to you is to bring you some of the world's leading experts in the domains of fitness, wellness, coaching, and behavior change, separating fact from fallacy.
Bobby Andrew Perpetually. I said your last name backwards. And I gave you a new middle name because I can't remember your middle name.
I think it's Joseph. You called me Andrew. Okay,
yeah, I know. Bobby Joseph. And then
my
I
alter
said
ego.
And then I said Perpetually.
Perpetually. Robert Andrew Perpetually. That is my alter ego. Whenever I unbutton the shirt, I turn into R. Andrew Pacuco, whatever.
Perpetually.
Can't even pronounce. I don't even know who I am anymore. So many
It sounds like a
versions of
very gangster name, Perpetually, compared to Capuccio.
Yeah, Capuccio sounds like you're just a really dedicated barista. Where the other one sounds like a character that was in 3 episodes of The Sopranos before they killed them off.
Do you know what's funny is I was literally thinking, as soon as I said it, that flashed into my mind. I was like, I feel like, how funny. And it's only 2 letters swapped around. How are you, mate?
I'm doing all right. How you going?
Oh, well, yeah. I'm
wow,
cold.
that's an answer.
Oh, yeah, I know. I'm cold. I'm exhausted a lot. I'm not having my best winter. I'm not having my best moment at the moment.
You struggle in winter, don't you?
I do struggle in winter, and this winter even more so. So I'm checking out all the avenues. You know, I'm at that age where I have hormonal shifts. So I'm checking all that out, that jazz out. You know, I was talking to a friend about it yesterday. We were having a bit of banter back and front, and I laughed. I ended up laughing, right? Because we were leaving voice notes. And you know, the act of talking, speaking, saying something, sometimes if you hear yourself say something, it's a whole new thing aside from what you can think something in your mind. When you say it out loud, you hear it differently. You understand it differently.
It lands and you internalize it. Yeah.
Yeah, and if I look at our conversation, we're back and forth kind of, because we're similar, we're the same epigenetic health type, so we're activators. For people who don't know, PH360 is a biology profiling tool to help us understand our profile. So she's an activator, I'm an activator. We have very similar traits in terms of personality, style of exercise, explosiveness, like all of the things where like activators can burn out because we just don't want to stop. We do everything at full tilt until we crash and burn if we don't integrate short rests and, do the things. We love stress. We're like little stress monkeys. We've got to manage that. So I'm talking to her, and she's also ADHD. So I was having the conversation, there's being an activator, and then there's the ADHD traits, and then there's that crossover between ADHD or also is it coping mechanisms from trauma history? All of these things overlap like everything does in life. And it's like, well, which label do we use for this? And then I was saying, and then there's just life, but like 41 years. And if I look at the last 5 and what I've been doing and how consistently and long, and I've got it's the best life I've lived in terms of what I get to do, the breakdown of time I get to spend doing each thing. I absolutely love it, but I'm on all the time. So I've trained this brain and body and mind to just be like, go, next thing. And I love it all. And then we get to this point in the conversation where I share with her maybe the last 12 months. I go, well, there was this because you know what else is stress aside from stress? Excitement. Like what happens when you get really excited about something in your body?
Yeah, it's exhausting.
Yeah. So I wind back at the beginning of last year, and I was approached and asked to audition for, so then I was training really hard physically for this TV show, this adventure TV show, and Harps was training me. And then when that TV show actually didn't end up going ahead and going to air, shortly after that, I decided I've got to do something then. I'll go back. I'll train for fighting. And then I went straight out of that training, continuing strength training, into fight training, which was for a few months, highly, highly intense and stressful and emotional and all of the things. And then around that time, we also started doing the filming and peppering the promo for Mark Seymour's album to come out, which was super exciting. And I was like, oh my goodness. And then he starts hitting the media, and then it launched in February. And all throughout this time, and as I was relaying all these things to Sage up until now, I was like, God, it's just, I mean, isn't it funny how we have our own answers? And in the start of the conversation, I'm like, I just can't pick why I feel like this. And then you finish the conversation, go, God, it is no wonder I feel like this. Who could even function on that timeline?
So you do all that and you need to unplug, but you're not doing it.
Yeah, because I realize that how do we train our minds? My mind is always doing. So stillness and rest, even my rest is not rest. And I've not been boxing lately, and I joined a yoga studio for a bit, and I thought I'll do some yin yoga and I'll do just a bit of light running here and there. And I caught myself saying to someone one day, I haven't trained for 2 weeks. That morning I'd gone for only 3.5K, but I'd done a 3.5K run, then a yoga class. So at 10 a.m. I'm saying to this person, I haven't trained for 2 weeks. That day I'd done a yoga class and a run, and I was going to be going,
for an average person, a month's worth of exercise. By 10 a.m. it's like, oh, I'm not even trained.
Right. And so then it's when you adjust everything, it's like, okay, so I'm going to eat like this. I've stopped the intermittent fasting because that's a stressor when your cortisol's high. I'm like, okay, so I'm not intermittent fasting. So my food patterns are changing. Also the style of exercise and the intensity and the frequency, that's all shifting. Mm-hmm. And I found myself feeling really lost in, hang on, what is my baseline? I have to readjust into what's appropriate. What is exercise?
Yeah, what's your baseline?
Yeah.
You know, it's interesting. I was talking to Dr. Cam McDonald not too long ago around the subject of burnout. And he was talking about people like you who are sympathetic dominant. When you're approaching burnout, you don't shut down. You don't disassociate, disconnect. You drive harder and harder and harder. Yeah. And people in that category are putting in more and more effort, and the more effort they put in, the worse they perform and the worse they feel. They don't push through. I finally did my profile.
What are you?
I'm a connector on the cusp of activator.
Yes.
I don't know if that makes me a stress monkey. I think I'm a cheeky monkey, but I definitely one of the monkeys.
It makes sense because you're very people and relationship focused. You like to be part of the team and the tribe and I love that. That's so great.
Yes, I finally did it.
And what have you learned about yourself?
I pretty much knew that. Like, I was like, okay, this makes sense.
Yeah.
I get it. So I thought like activator makes a lot of sense. Crusader makes a lot of sense. Connector makes a lot of sense for me. I was like, I'm a connector on the cusp of activator. Right. So I'm like one of those connecting activator types of people. Okay.
You're a connectivator.
I was correct in my suspicions about myself.
It's so enlightening though, isn't it? I don't know if you felt, I remember when I first learned about that process and learned about some of the behavioral traits, that idea of permission. And I don't know if you felt the same, but for me, you know, with an activator's propensity to need to move, right? Movement's number one.
Yeah.
That was a real eye-opener to go, at times where train in the morning and then I feel the need that I want to train again. I go, have I got an unhealthy relationship with exercise? But realizing that there's this hard wiring that the body needs to move to express energy and to
and what type of movement and when.
Yeah.
Like for me, I've always wanted to be a morning exerciser. Like, but when I say exercise, I'm talking about like really getting after it and doing resistance training. But like when I would be on the road, people get up super early. It's like, oh, we're going to the gym. You want to go? And I knew intuitively, no, because I will feel amazing for about 30 minutes to an hour after, and then I will be useless. But I do need a lot of exercise very early in the morning, lower intensity, a lot of movement, not anything too taxing or too strenuous. That type of things are done ideally for me in the afternoon, when the afternoon's not possible in the evening.
Yeah.
But it's like, I love morning workouts. They're not physiologically suited for me. For me, it's like taking a really brisk, long walk first thing in the morning, like listening to some type of audio program, just switches me right on. It's like, oh, it's going through a lot of the things that I learned through trial and error and saying, this is what you need. And I'm going, oh, wow, that's amazing.
It is
that's
amazing.
Exactly how I live my life when the variables are more under my control.
Yes, I'm the same so to move in the morning is for me better off to be cardio and then strength in the afternoon. And that's when I actually prefer, like I way prefer training in the morning over the afternoon, but I do feel stronger and better doing strength training in the afternoon. It's just really interesting how the body just actually knows. But sometimes we do override that. So the line can be crossed by what we listen to, what we tell ourselves. You know, I have not really white knuckled. I've really embraced and loved intermittent fasting, knowing that it is a stressor for my biology because I'm an activator. And I knew that, but discounting all those other stresses that I was under for all that time, realizing that was actually just predisposing me to this burnout. And but because, and this is what I think happens with any highly restrictive diet. You look at keto and carnivore and vegan, anything where people just cut out everything at the start. Because I was very quick to accept that, okay, when I start to intermittent fast, my body loves it for a start. My body composition is like, bam, this is great. My relationship with food is great and my energy is great. So my hunger hormones are much more manageable for me in terms of having a good, healthy relationship with food. Everything's just easier. But over a period of time, I always tend to burn out. And I think that is a big contributing factor. And then you go, okay, well, that's just not an option. For a long term.
It's all cumulative stress. I mean, I've been on an all sashimi diet for like 3 weeks now. I'm loving it.
Only sashimi.
Just pure sashimi.
Okay.
I blew it. I had 3 blueberries the other day. Felt completely off the wagon.
How do you manage your, like, that idea? Do you ever burn out? You're over
all the time,
everything?
All the time, because like I realized something, and so a couple of weeks ago, I did a presentation and it was like a really bad one. It's so funny because we all tell ourselves stories and we have our own standards of performance, and we should, but a lot of times we tell ourselves stories about how something went. And I knew I was not on that day. As a matter of fact, I was like the anti-on, almost off. I was awake in the room. I was conscious, so I wasn't completely off, but that was not a very good showing. The feedback was better than usual. So apparently people really like me stupid and half dead. It's like, might be my new persona. So in the debrief with the organization that I had done this event for, we were talking about things, and I had realized, like, on my time off, it's not time off. So I will just stress out and ruminate about work in a more serene environment. And that's basically what I was considering taking time off. Like, yeah, I take a day off. You have to take a day off. And I was like, oh, I don't take a day off. Like, I would say, throughout the day, I am back going through my head, running through checklists, literally putting things together in my head, and I am not shutting off and not thinking about work. And it's like, wow, okay. And then I wonder why sometimes I'm in that situation where I'm pushing, but the faster I try to move forward, the slower I'm actually going. And I'm in that kind of vicious cycle. But you're not alone. because right now, according to Christina Masloch, who has done some incredible research out of UC Berkeley, 10 to 15% of the workforce is experiencing burnout. So not like they're heading towards it, they're there. And this is extreme. I mean, you can take a look at it two ways. You can take a look at the human cost and the financial cost. I think a lot of things that organizations do, not because they're callous and heartless, just because it's an easier metric, is to go, well, what is this costing us? And it's just that if you have a 10,000 person organization, 15% of your workforce is experiencing burnout, that is costing you $26 million. Now, in the United States, employee disengagement is a huge problem. Actually, it's a huge problem globally. According to the Gallup organization, nearly 80% of the workforce is actively disengaged. In some places like Japan, that number's a lot higher and they're going into crisis. But employee disengagement within the United States, I happen to know that stat off the top of my head, cost over $550 billion a year. So what's interesting about that is even though it's 10 to 15% of the people are in burnout, upwards of 50% of the people are on their way towards a state of burnout, which is one of the main reasons, that and lack of psychological safety, but lack of psychological safety contributes to burnout. It's one of the biggest contributors to employee disengagement. That and the manager. Like one of the main drivers of employee disengagement is poor leadership practices, or as we've been discussing on this podcast right now for, 2 years, erroneous belief systems resulting in toxic practices by leadership who are probably not bad people. I mean, some of them are really bad people, but most of them are probably not bad people. They're trying to do the best that they can. It's their operating system is flawed. There's a bug in the system. And because a lot of times we're in positions where the evidence of your erroneous practices are not immediate, like they are in, let's say, a game of Aussie rules, or they are in the theater where you're performing and people are like throwing tomatoes at you, you keep doing them and you double down on what doesn't work because at one time there was a benefit, or at one time you felt confident because you went to a course, or your mentor who had like 80% of their workforce quit on them, but you looked up to them, said, hey, this is how you have to be. So they're just perpetuating conditioned practices that don't work. So you have so many people in the workforce right now that are disengaged, heading towards burnout. And when we talk about well-being, this is kind of interesting. Can I get into this a little bit?
Yes, please.
So well-being is a state of thriving, right? Because when you take a look at well-being, like the Gallup organization talks about the integrated harmonious optimization, I'm paraphrasing, but they talk about career, social, financial, physical well-being, and community well-being being all of the factors that come together to produce a state of thriving. And we know thriving people perform better at absolutely everything than languishing people perform. Now, when you take a look at which one of those variables that when they come together produce a state of thriving in an individual, you got career, social well-being, financial well-being. You have, of course, physical well-being. So all the things about like stress management, sleep, movement, exercise, diet.
Social well-being.
Well, and then we have community. Well, yeah, social is right up there. But the number one now, and when I say number one, before somebody says, well, not in my country, not in my community, this was the conclusion that they found by analyzing the data of over 100 million interviews across nearly 200 countries, representing 98% of the world's population. So yeah, your neighborhood too. The number one driver of well-being is job satisfaction. It is the meaning of work.
Yeah.
And how aligned your values and your strengths are with your job. And the reason for that is because when that's happening, you have purpose, you have a sense of engagement, which in and of itself is extremely healthy. Like these things are not the totality of a strategy, but in part, some of the things that stave off dementia. So the impact is incalculable when it comes to quality of life. But when you're satisfied with your job, you're kind of in an environment where one of the questions that Gallup asks, and it's so insightful, and a lot of managers would balk at this, like, I don't care, I want to minimize that. You could not be more wrong, is, do I feel like I have a best friend at work? Because when you are driving towards a meaningful vision, right? Like, your job isn't just where you go to make a living. It is where you collectively go to make a difference. You're going to have some strong bonds. So you start to facilitate those connections that drive social well-being. Now, you also, if you're really satisfied in your job, money is not the only factor that results in job satisfaction. You can make a lot of money and be miserable at your job, but there is kind of like a baseline. They used to say it was like something like $76,000. Now it's like upwards of 90,000 towards the six-figure mark, where I need that baseline to not worry about finances. But beyond that, it really doesn't add all that much to job satisfaction. But if you're in a job that you love, you're probably experiencing a baseline level of financial well-being, and you're probably engaging, because a lot of times when people don't engage in certain things that support physical wellness, my take on it is, you're not lazy. It's not because you lack character. There are things that are going on in your environment and within the biochemistry and function of your brain that is producing certain behavior patterns, or acting as constraints towards certain behavior patterns that you normally would engage in. And like when you talk about like behavior, like or motivation, people use that word a lot. It's just a reason for doing something or behaving in some way. Like, how does my body either react or respond to environmental stimuli, right? Motivation, behavior. But you're probably engaging in more, you're probably moving more, you're probably a hell of a lot more active, and you're probably more involved in your community, or more likely to appreciate and be grateful for aspects of your community. So it's almost like career well-being, because work is so central to who we are as human beings globally. It's kind of like the domino that sets off that chain reaction, if that makes any sense.
I love that. My question is, entrepreneurs, how do I be the leader for me? And as I was thinking of this question for you, so how do I lead me better? Because obviously I've got the answers, and I'd never let an employee or another person or a client fall into the patterns, getting the results that I'm getting, knowing the answers I know, and continue to do that. Why is it so difficult for us to pull ourselves out of those practices? And then second to that, when I think of leaders, they have this additional tribe. They have all of that social, and they have this feedback from leadership. So they're giving, they're contributing, they're leading, they're seeing their results. When you're an entrepreneur, you're leading just yourself, but you don't have the team that you're leading. So you're missing out on some of those connections there. So can you talk a little bit on those things, all of that?
Well, hold on.
Salad of questions I asked.
I really want to, oh man, I want to take you back to something that you said. Explain more around, I would never let an employee, like, what were you saying there? Like, what would you not let an employee do?
So if a version of me came to me and said, this is how I feel, and this is what's going on, and this is, like I said to you at the start of the show, this is my last 12 months, and this is how I've been living life, and this is how I'm now feeling, I would go, well, the answer's pretty clear. You need to address this, this, and this.
Right. Okay. So you wouldn't allow an employee to languish the way you languish in your job. You wouldn't expect that from your employee, is what you're saying.
Yeah.
You would try to provide resources.
So now, like when we see what the answer likely is, and I'm like, okay, I'm going to have to just reevaluate how I'm doing life right now, lifestyle, how much I'm working. I need better protocols for switching off. I need better socializing protocols because I'm not switching off. I'm too exhausted to kind of be present in those social activities. And then they're taxing me more because I'm going in with empty batteries. But in the middle of all of that, why is it so hard to make the changes? Because I'm not the only one.
No, you're not.
Maybe I am the only one.
You're absolutely not. And I think the first step is acknowledging I am not alone in this. Okay. So there's not like, well, what is wrong with me as an entrepreneur in my business? Nope, you're not. You are probably part of the majority, to be fair. So acknowledging I'm not the only one would be a really great first step. The other things, and I'm not speaking from like, well, here's how an entrepreneur should approach this. I'm speaking from, okay, you are someone who has a ton of responsibility that falls on top of you. And sometimes if you don't do something, or if you unplug in a way that you desperately need to, shit doesn't get done and there are enormous consequences. And you probably are someone who has very few employees, or maybe you're an organization of one. And I don't want to comment on any of that because people's situations are different and there is a difference between what is an ideal situation versus reality. But let's pick apart a couple of elements. First is what is under my control and what is not under my control. Because there are certain things day to day that you have to respond to. They are urgent and important, kind of like the Eisenhower matrix, like what's important and urgent. Can't ignore that in a business and still be in business too much longer. What is important, right? But it's not necessarily urgent. So, like I have a bill that has to be paid, or I have payroll. I have to do that. If I don't do that, I'm going to lose employees, right? The consequences might even be worse than that. I'm violating some labor laws there. So have to address that. That falls under important and urgent. Important but not urgent is I need to upgrade my skills because I have to constantly innovate and grow my organization, or else it's going to die. But I don't need to do that today. And I don't need to do it by Friday, but I definitely need to do it, right? Then there are things that are urgent, but they're not important. So there's this email I have to respond to for the good of the relationship because I have not gotten back to it in a timely fashion. But if I didn't respond to it, it's not like there would be severe consequences if I ignored it. And if I respond to this email, there could be a huge advantage or benefit. But it's something that I kind of need to do. It's acting upon me. Somebody needs to respond. Or like I'm in the middle of doing a show. And this is really important because an organization wants to use bits of this episode. So I've got to get this done. Somebody comes knocking on my door and they won't go away. That's urgent, but not important. It's like, oh, hey, is this apartment 3? No, that's down the hall. It says 5 right on the door. Oops, sorry. I don't look at numbers. So, and then you have things that are neither urgent nor important. They are tasks that you have just conditioned yourself to do because it gives you a sense of completion. It gives you a sense of autonomy. You don't trust anybody else. But if you completely ignored this, nothing really bad would happen. And if you got right on it, nothing really good would happen. So let's start taking a look at within this matrix, what is the urgent and important, right? I got to do that. Let's take a look at the important. Which one of these things are in my control and not in my control? Because that allows you to see what can I put off a little bit longer and give myself a breathing room. And what do I need to tackle? Maybe not today, but I absolutely need to tackle it and it's unavoidable. But that gives me a locus of control because I am directing intention at it. In other words, I am choosing this stressor, this thing that even though it may seem like a complete pain in the arse at the moment, I'm going to tackle it. The greater locus of control I have, the lower the deleterious effects of stress on me. So it's not exactly stress that's the problem. It's the interpretation of stress. I mean, of course, when stress is intense enough and it's chronic enough, doesn't matter where it's coming from. Like you just talked about, like I'm super stressed out and then I go to my favorite like rugby match and I'm super excited. I'm adding stress on top of stress. That's not like I need to back off and decompress, but how I frame and interpret stress. If you have two people in a very similar situation tackling the same workload and one person believes, oh my God, I'm so stressed. I never perform well when I'm stressed. Another person is like, oh God, like stress just gets me going. It's my competitive edge. Person A is going to have more of a negative physiological impact in the face of the same stress as person B, all things being equal. You also said, well, how come I go back and do the same behaviors over and over? I think there's two sides to this. One, you might need to, right? You got a business and there are things that like in the first couple of years, especially the first year, you're on the verge of going out of business all the time. I might need to do this. It's like the second part of that is when I'm afraid, when I am anxious, when I am angry, I'm not open and innovative and creative. I double down on the consistently reinforced behavior patterns that I am currently conditioned to engage in. I go back to what has traditionally worked. Like there was a show back in the 1950s in the US called The Honeymooners, right? And one of the stars, it's about this couple, Ralph Cramden and Alice Cramden, and they lived in Brooklyn, which is where I grew up. And Ralph is kind of like a hothead. He like flies off the handle for ain't like the slightest provocation, but it's really not helping his relationships around him, especially with Alice. She's not having this. And even though Ralph thinks that he runs the household, he doesn't. Alice is the boss in this situation, hands down. So he learns this technique that when he finds himself getting angry, he does a pattern interrupt where he says something like, I think it was pins and needles, needles and pins. It's a happy man that grins. And he flashes a smile and instantly he feels better. Now things are going really well because every time he starts to go back into his preconditioned pattern, and he gets really angry, right? With like his mate in the building, Ed Norton. He says that phrase, flashes the smile, pattern interrupt. Now he's able to make a better choice. Ralph's doing great. Except there's this one day where all these stresses culminate and he is in such a stress and he just tries to initiate it and like saying it, the phrase gets him even angrier and he just snaps. He goes right back into his conditioned patterns. And it's funny because we're all Ralph Cramden a little bit in that regard. So that's an answer to that. I think the bigger question is, what do we want and need in these situations? Like, what would you want for your employee? Well, one, just listening to someone, even if you don't speak, but being completely invested and being mindful of what they're saying and what they're feeling and reflecting and repeating, that creates a polyvagal response for both people, especially face to face. So that's a great way of down-regulating that physiological state. Sometimes, like when we feel alone, this is why mastermind groups are so powerful. If I could just share what I'm going through with other entrepreneurs, and I don't even need them to say, hey, like we could talk about that in a second. Why don't you do this? Or, I did this and just listening empathetically, that conversation will help the both of you, not just one. Also, like hearing from other people. Yeah, Tiffany, I was in that same situation last year. Here's kind of how I handled it. I don't know if this works for your situation, but it worked for me and my employees. And here's the result. Wow. It's almost like when I was in Australia last year in Melbourne, I was reading a book by Mogawat, which was a terrifying book called Scary Smart. And it was about the rise of artificial intelligence. And one of the things that he said is, by the year, by 2050 or 2049, artificial intelligence will be generalized. In other words, it will be self-aware and it will have general intelligence. It's not like it's programmed to do this specific task, like find you airline tickets. So it'll be a self-aware, independently thinking, general intelligence about 1 billion with a B times smarter than Albert Einstein. And that is potentially amazing for humanity, or that is the most dystopian, terrifying reality that humanity has ever faced. Either way, it's going to be impactful. But he said one of the reasons why AI, its intelligence and evolution, is getting away from the designers is because how many millions of people are using AI? I feed something into my AI over here in my little corner of the world that has never quite been fed into to any AI before. My AI just learned something. Guess what? The second my AI learns something, they all learn it instantly. It's like that hive mind. Masterminds do that. I mean, of course, we're not going to learn to the degree, nor are we going to learn at the same speed as an AI, but you have 15 people in your mastermind that are all in the same situation. They are hardworking, dedicated, and a lot of times stressed out entrepreneurs. But they all work in different industries. They're at different points of evolution and growth within their company, within their own leadership and ownership journey. One person comes back to that mastermind and offers a piece of insight. Everybody learns it if they're open to it. But that's not what happens with human beings by itself. Here's what happens. We have all of our past experiences, interpretations, perspective, biases. So not only do we all learn something, I just got an insight that nobody else got, and I volunteer that. And that provokes another insight that somebody else got, and they volunteer that. So you have 15 people in a mastermind. One person learns something. All 15 get that information, but then we learn something again within the span of 30 minutes. And that grows exponentially. So that gives you social connection. It gives you social support, which is a stress mitigator and essential for well-being. You're tapping into your community. You're learning and you're growing. So here's the thing, long-term, high performance, learning and growth is one of the greatest stress mitigators and contributors to well-being, therefore thriving. It's that. And we don't talk about that. We talk about like eating vegetables. We talk about movement. Very important. We don't talk about learning and development. We don't talk about sitting down in person, face-to-face with people, like kind of like we did before the New World Order, and working things out. Even engaging in conflict with people you care about who all care about the same singular thing. So all of those things are critical for employees. And here's something interesting. Google wanted to figure out who are the top performing teams within their entire organization. Now, Google isn't necessarily known for having low performing employees. But what they wanted to identify, and they don't really have a chill, relaxed work environment either, but they wanted to know who were the best of the best. And their assumption was the teams that are performing or outperforming everyone else probably have the smartest people. Well, there's a fallacy, there's a flaw in that logic. One, they don't appreciate like team dynamics and exponential learning and growth, right? Like, I'm sure they appreciate it, but it wasn't their main assumption. And number two, everybody at Google is intelligent. Everyone. Some annoyingly so, right? They're the most irritatingly intelligent people you'll ever meet. Here's what they found. It wasn't who was on the team. It wasn't what they knew. It was how the team functioned. And within that dynamic, the number one component was psychological safety. Because when you're really in a team that cares about process and outcome more than politics and who's right, you can say anything, right? You can volunteer something and not have to worry about somebody going, Tiff, that is the stupidest idea I have ever heard. Because what we're focused on is design thinking and the outcomes of that type of thought processes. We're not really worried about who's right. We're worried about what's right. So they can engage in all of these dynamics that drive thriving, but they also have psychological safety, and they're encouraged to speak like diversity. That's something like, God, this can keep going and going and going. But after doing like over 200 extensive interviews, they found that this was what produced the best of the best teams within Google. It was that interpersonal dynamic. So sometimes you need to build that because it's just you and one employee.
Yeah.
Like, who are other entrepreneurs? I know you go to networking events.
Well, I was just going to talk about that because I'd stepped out of my regular networking morning meetings at the end of last year to spend time on different parts of my business and to free up a little bit of time and just to reevaluate. And I'd started to really notice that component of what I got out of networking that I loved so much. I was like, I've got to start looking for just getting a little bit of that back in. And I got asked to speak at an event yesterday, and it happened to be a networking style event. It was a lunch in Albert Park, and I really loved it. Like, I was just thinking about it as you were talking, and I go, that's always been my number one reason for networking over all of the years that I've networked. It's been because it fills my cup, because I learn from people, we engage. I like the minds of the people that enter the room, and this particular room was really, and I said, like, I'll be back next month to your next meeting as a guest. So I was there as a speaker this time, and I was like, I'm going to come back because I really enjoyed the energy of the people in this room. And it wasn't one of those meetings where everyone rushes off. It was like, when I turned up, weirdly, there was two people I knew from there. One was the person who asked me if I'd be available. And then there was another person I'd known, but everyone felt familiar. And it just, I had 2.5 hours sleep the night before. I had wicked insomnia. So I was on a very low battery, but it just filled my cup. And I loved that. Yeah.
It is so important. Like, in the fitness industry, Richard Boyd just wrote a great post on LinkedIn, and he was talking about like how he was able to go into an organization and, without knowing anything about like their data, tell them who their top 20 performing employees were, who are the top 10 performing clubs financially, on the personal training side, simply because he was able to pull from PT on the Net usage reports. And there was a shockingly strong correlation between people who were constantly educating themselves and using the site and performance in the workplace. And so when people go to conferences consistently, yes, it shows a commitment to learning and development, to upskilling, but there's also so much more. It is so invigorating. It is energizing. I know people that they're so stressed out. They work really hard, but they felt so super engaged because they would just bridge the gap between one conference and another. They would go like every 6 weeks. And those types of events, not only because of the education, but because of the camaraderie and the communication with other attendees. Sometimes the most beneficial part of a conference is the after hours dinners It's the after hours conversations in the pub, because it provides you, especially you talk about personal trainers. A lot of times they are entrepreneurs in a company of one, and then they get together and they get all of those other elements that should be part of every organization's culture.
Yeah.
I don't even know if I answered your original question, but
I can't even remember what the question was.
Like, I'm an entrepreneur, right? So, and I'm burning out and I'm working all these hours.
Yeah.
Like, which, and by the way, I mean, the total number of hours.
You know what specifically answers that question? Because my question was who leads the leader? How does the leader learn to lead themselves? That environment actually lends itself to the environment almost becomes a bit of a leader and a reflection. I think, because you get to, you get that outside perspective, you get other people's perspectives, you get outside of your own bubble for a little bit, and you become part of a team, even if it's only for 2 hours, 2 hours once a month or once a week or once a fortnight, whenever it is. It causes a little kink in the routine that allows you to step out and go, because sometimes I think it's the routine that you just, like, we're so busy hopping up and doing the routine that it's hard to step out of the routine to change the routine. The routine's not working, but I'm so busy in the middle of it that I don't know when to. You know what it just reminded me of? A few years ago, I used to run retreats in Thailand with boxing and take people over there, and we'd do the retreats at a Muay Thai gym, but there was also a CrossFit gym nearby, and we'd often go and do a couple of classes at CrossFit. And this CrossFit place was crazy. People from all over the world go to this strip it's in Shillong in Thailand and train. So you're training with these weapons from all over the world, all sorts of athletes. And this particular CrossFit gym has 2 CrossFit conditioning classes that specifically have not for beginners. I think one was called Death Row and one was called something else equally as tragic. And it had, like, if you have been on this street for less than 2 weeks, you're not allowed to do this class. If you're under 18, you're not allowed to do this class. The lead into the class, speaking of stress, I love this, the lead into the class, the trainer, like the spectacle of him telling you what this class was going to be like was like anxiety evoking. And he was like, if you get tapped on the shoulder, you're going to have to pick up the pace because you're not keeping up. If you get tapped twice, you're out. We have a 15-minute warm-up outside, which was grueling. He goes, you have until the end of that warm-up to go back to the front desk and get your money back. If you come in and start the workout after that and you choose to leave, you don't get your money back. So it was like this whole build-up. And I was standing there.
At least they know their market.
Oh, it was insane. And I'm there amidst these massive, rippling, strong blokes, and there was 1 or 2 other chicks, but they were like apparently like very obviously CrossFitters, so they were conditioned to this. And I was there like looking around going, I don't know if I'm in the right place. Anyway, we start the workout. I choose to go in and start it, and then in no time, 2 people got tapped and sent out pretty quickly. And I spent from 5 minutes in from the actual workout, I was like, okay, I'm not going to finish this. I just don't know when to stop. And the thing is, it was a Tabata timing, so it was 20 seconds on, 10 seconds off with however many rounds and then to the next thing. The only thing that kept me until the end of the class was decision paralysis, was the fact that I'm in the middle of this routine and I can't make the decision in the middle of this stress of when to get off the piece of equipment and just leave. And then the next minute it was the end of the session. And that's kind of the relationship I can feel in the middle of, okay, this is really hard. I need to get off, but I don't know when to get off the ride.
That is such a great correlation. I couldn't make the decision. Now, it's not just in that environment. It's not just decision making. Like, how creative would you be? How collaborative would you be? Like, how many connections would you see? So when you think about every skill set that makes you really good long-term in your career or your business, when you're under that level of stress, I mean, I'm not comparing like day-to-day work to a super like death row level intensity CrossFit class, but you are performing worse, significantly worse at every critical success factor. But I mean, back in the 1990s, the big push was around effectiveness. Like, what are you doing to drive performance and outcomes and value? Now it's around how much are you doing? And I get that sometimes, like I'm still working technically right now, if you can call this work. It's, 7:30 at night nearly. When I get off this conversation, I have to call one of my colleagues back because they just rang me in the middle of this. I'm going to be probably working until 7:30 in the evening. I went down and started my workday at my building's office at 5:30 in the morning. So I'm kind of a hypocrite, right? So when it comes to shutting it down, my workday is going to be like 15 hours, all said and done today.
Yeah.
And I've been going consistently through 15-minute breaks. But imagine like I'm doing this all day, every day, 7 days a week. It's kind of like you got a football team. And you're like, okay, we're going to extend practice threefold. And we're going to do it every day, 0 rest times. And we're doing this. We're going to practice really hard. So this way we can win more matches. But that's not what's going to happen. What's going to happen is you're going to create serial distortion patterns. You're going to create faulty recruitment patterns, synergistic dominance. You're going to create faulty mechanical wear patterns due to the level of fatigue and the impact of that in the connect chain. Your rate of injury on the team, even in practice, forget about like getting to the match, is going to skyrocket while your performance is over time going to plummet. You are going to be a really shit team. So somehow cognitive performance and work performance works completely differently than performance in sport. Explain the neuroscience behind that to me, because I don't get it. So sometimes people are in that zone out of necessity. Sometimes it's just that cycle. Like I remember I posted something a while back about you need to decompress and take a complete day off, which I just realized God, I'm so hypocritical. As you talk about, you say things out loud. And it's like, God, how full of shit am I? But I was like, you got to take a complete day off. I was very sincere. Intention and behavior does not line up all the time. And there's neurobiological reasons for that as well. But I'm just probably making excuses for myself. But somebody who was in the health and fitness industry came back and said, how do you take a day off in the week when you have goals that are important to you? You are in the fitness industry. You are a speaker and a leader globally in fitness. And you're like, nah, recovery doesn't matter. I'm sorry, because 15 minutes of breath work or meditation is not going to cut it. You need to look at how your environment's structured, and you don't have to improve everything, not today, what is in your control. And sometimes, especially if you are dealing with creative work, you have got to completely unplug. Like I always talk about Mendeleev, the creator of the periodic table. The harder he tried at a sticking point, the more he pushed and pushed and pushed and grinded, all that, the more it escaped him. It was when he just completely quit and just went to bed. The answers came to him in a dream. You have to like disconnect, because in a state of high arousal or panic, bad things happen. I'll give you an example. So do you know what is his name? His name was Petrov. Have you ever heard this name? I think it was Sergei Petrov. He was an officer in the Soviet army.
I have not.
Captain Petrov, I believe he was a captain. Nobody's ever heard of this guy, but he's kind of important because he saved your life, Tiff. He saved my life. As a matter of fact, he saved the lives of everyone you know and we'll ever know. He literally saved the world. Tony Stark has nothing on this guy. Zero. And this is what happened. The Russian computer defense system malfunctioned, and it indicated on their radar that there were 5 nuclear missiles that were launched from the United States, rapidly approaching the US at that time, the USSR. And everybody following protocols in a state of high alert and stress and panic. What do you think they did? They reverted to the training. So they were like, okay, we're going to fire back. This is the start of World War III, like complete nuclear holocaust. As they are going through like the levels of approval, right? And the protocols, get it like 5 seconds from launching, literally initiating an attack, because the US hadn't actually launched anything. This was a malfunction. This guy somehow maintains his composure, takes a look, and he's like, okay, so the United States has launched a preemptive nuclear attack on the Soviet Union. And they have, I don't know who had the larger arsenal at that point. Maybe it was us, but we both had enough nuclear weapons to blow up the world hundreds of times over. They decided to launch 5. Something is not right here. This is wrong. Abort. And against like everybody's like demands and admonitions, and like he just disobeyed orders, shut the whole shit down. He was like that final like line of defense. Could you imagine if this guy had not had a day off in 2 weeks and he was stressed out of his mind and completely sleep deprived? None of us would be here right now. So one, thank you, Petrov. Well, he's gone now, but thank you. He died in the late 1990s, but wherever you are, thank you for saving billions of people. And thanks for taking that day off somewhere.
Well, I've established a prior habit that I did for a little while just last night, and that is taking my watch off to sleep. Because since I've been having sleep issues and waking up at silly, ridiculous hours, I've also been registering really low when I do sleep, registering really low on REM, usually no REM sleep, and low on deep sleep, and realizing that my relationship with the data is actually causing me more stress than the sleep itself. So just taking my watch off my wrist.
Oh my God. Yeah. There's her name's, what's her name? Angie Lee, does the Angie Lee show. She's a podcaster. She had said something like that recently. Like she was doing all these well-being practices and stressing over all this data and stressing over sleep patterns, eating patterns, moving back. And she's like, all of this is making me unhappy and extremely stressed out. And this like obsession with well-being is really detrimental to my well-being. I need to just like sometimes unplug and enjoy myself and not worry about it. And another thing that's critical for well-being, and the data does not show this. This is purely anecdotal. Do not get a cat.
Oh, shit.
That paw will be slapping your face at 1 a.m., 3 a.m.
Mine gets locked up. I had to buy fucking loop earplugs.
Oh my
just
days.
So because she knocks on she jumps up at the door handle of her room at 5:30 every morning. And I don't let her out there. I get up. Most mornings I get up at 6 or 6:30, but I refuse to respond to her. But I have to. As soon as I wake up, I have to go to the bathroom. So I do that. And as soon as she hears me go to the bathroom, she goes back to bed. And I'm like, why do you do this? And then today I get home and I lay in front of the heater with freezing cold feet, and I lay down, and along she comes, and she's either laying on my stomach, or if I sit up, she sits on my shoulders and jams her nails into my neck. And I'm like, can you just get off me? I'm exhausted and I'm cold and I just want to lay here in front of the heater without you on my stomach, weighing my stomach down or jamming your nails into my shoulders. And I know that's love, but I just
oh
get
my
out.
days. So yeah, he will like headbutt both of us, lay on top of your chest. Sometimes he'll do it backwards. So his ass is like right in your face. And it's just, and he knows how to open up doors. So he'll like jump up, grab hold of that lever on the doorknob and push open. He's gotten kicked out so many times. He knows the routine.
Yeah.
So now he'll come into the room in the middle of the night, right? And he'll complete, because the rules are, you can lay in bed if you go to sleep. You're more than welcome here. You start fucking about, you're out of here. So he will jump to the two of us, like slap us, headbutt us, do all the things, and then go right out the door. Like, okay, I guess I'm out of here now. So he knows, like, okay, I've messed it up. I'm leaving. So he has this one big episode, middle of the night. There's no way to stop him because he knows how to get into the room. And then he puts himself out of the room and he doesn't say anything until 5 a.m. because he knows 5 a.m. is when he wakes up and he feeds me brekkie at 5 a.m. And the only reason why I feed him at 5 a.m. is so I can have like a minute of peace in the morning.
Yeah.
So 5 a.m. he's like back at it again. Like, what are you doing? Wake up. So I've got this like live-in like David Goggins.
Goggins, that's really funny. They're such assholes.
Tell me when to go to bed, when to wake up.
Like, that you love them anyway. It's like this. I didn't ask for this.
Oh, he's just. But then he'll just like I'll leave in the morning and I'll come back a little bit later and he'll just like crawl up me and like grab with his paw like my index finger and hang on to it. It's like, oh, okay. This is why I got a cat in the first place. He's adorable. He's lovely. So yeah, like thriving, job satisfaction, and don't get a cat. Those are the main takeaway points. Unless you already have a cat, then
you're in strife. Write that down, everyone. Thanks so much, Bobby.
Thank you, Tiff. I'll see you soon.
You sure will. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Visit us at theselfhelpantidote.com to share your feedback, insights, and recommendations on what topics you'd like us to explore in the future.